everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I was supposed to post my self-tape video, but because I was way ahead of schedule, which never happens, I decided to post that video last week, and some of you may have already seen it. But I wanted to also post a video in my usual last Friday of the month slot, so today we're doing something a little bit different. Today I'm going to be doing a bullet journal video and showing you all my setup for May. The worlds of bullet journaling and the world of theatre collide in this video. I've mentioned my bullet journal briefly in previous videos, especially relating to how I keep myself organised and accountable. I've personally found bullet journaling incredibly helpful, firstly as an organisational tool first and foremost, but also as a bit of a creative outlet that's just for me. It's not performative in any way. I don't have to show anyone. I don't show anyone. This is the first time anyone's going to be seeing inside my bullet journal. So yeah, it is something that is just for me and I love it. I'll link some videos down below by other creators explaining the bullet journal system and how it works if any of you are curious. But for now, take a seat, grab a cup of tea, and let's get to it. So this is my bullet journal. It's just a Paper Chase own brand dotted notebook. As you can see, I have planned out all of my spreads in pencil beforehand because I cannot draw and I did not trust myself to freehand in pen, especially when I'm filming a video and showing the world what my bullet journal setup is going to be like. I always plan out in pencil anyway. I just didn't realise it would show up on camera, so there we go. I always like to do a theme for each month. I just feel like it ties the whole month together. I chose the theme of music and I decided to do a monochrome black and white design. I made a point when I first started bullet journaling not to worry about aesthetics because, as I said, I'm not a natural drawer. I'm not naturally good at drawing, and I knew that if I wanted to try and make every single spread Instagrammable, I would never get anything done, and I wanted it to be an organisational tool. This is also why I don't do cover pages. If you've dipped your toe into the bullet journaling community at all, you will know that everyone does a cover page for each month. I don't do those because they would take me all day and I would never get anything that I needed to do done. But I do like having a monthly theme, like I said, and when I'm doing my monthly setups, I do like to give myself the time to be more artistic and creative. I really enjoy the time of taking an hour to myself to sit down and do my bullet journal setup for the month, and I find it really relaxing, really good for my mental health, and I feel like it kind of sets me up for the month ahead in a really positive way. So I'm starting off with my calendar spread. Usually my calendar is a 2-page spread, but because of the quarantine and everything, I'm not as busy as I would usually be, so I've condensed it down to 1 page. For the month title, in the background I've drawn a lyre. The lyre is one of the Greek symbols for music. It's associated not only with the Muses, which were the goddesses of the arts, but also with the god Apollo, who was the god of music, amongst a whole heap of other things. Apollo was in charge of everything. And then next to it, I've written a quote, and the quote says, "If music be the food of love, play on," and that's a quote from Twelfth Night, getting in my Shakespeare references. Usually the way I use my calendar is to write down events, deadlines, work shifts, things like that, and I usually write them directly into the calendar. But because the boxes are smaller, what I'm going to do is use symbols to denote when I have a day that a task needs to be done by, or when I've got a deadline coming up. And then underneath my calendar, I have a section called events and deadlines, and that's where I will write down the details of whatever symbol is down for a specific day. As you can see, also I'm freehanding my lines. even though I have guidelines in pencil, those were also freehanded. This is partly because, again, I just wanted to make a conscious effort to not make my bullet journal perfect and not waste my time on perfection. I also kind of like the aesthetic it gives my bullet journal of a kind of a freehand feel. And then if I ever draw really wonky lines that I just can't deal with, I'll just go over it again to make the line thicker and make it look like a thicker hand-drawn line. A lot of people in their bullet journal will do things like quote pages and things like that. Again, those kind of things are things that I will do when I feel like I need them, which is quite rare. But for example, last month I did a quote page about being calm because I was feeling a lot of anxiety with everything that was going on. And I took the time to be artistic with that. So I kind of do those more artistic bullet journaling things as and when I need them. So now I'm moving on to my monthly task list and my self-employment tracker. My self-employment tracker is something that I've mentioned before in previous videos, and this is where I keep track of what I personally am doing to help advance my career. The things I track are my self-submissions, writing pitches, auditions, and networking, which I don't like the term networking, but it's easier to say than making relationships with people who happen to work in the same industry as you. So this would usually be a full-page spread, but again, because times aren't as busy, I'm using the Alistair method, which is where each category has a column and then there's a larger column where you write the details of whatever is in that category. So for example, if I had an audition come through, I would mark in the column for audition, and then in the larger column I would say the details, so auditioned for such and such a project. And then we've got my monthly task list, which is one of the main reasons I found bullet journaling so useful and helpful for me. As you probably know, with traditional diaries, they don't tend to have a monthly planning section. All of the space you have to write things down are daily and occasionally weekly, depending on the layout. But being an actor, my life changes from week to week, and sometimes things can change with 24 hours notice. And so the thought of having to write down what I wanted to do on specific days caused me a lot of anxiety. It would be a case of like when I was trying to get organised and schedule things and something would come up, I would feel very anxious. And then on the flip side, it meant that to avoid that, I just wasn't writing anything down that I wanted to do. So I felt very disorganised, very lost. Whereas being able to have a monthly task list allows me to write everything down that I want or need to do and get it out of my head and onto paper without having to commit to a specific day or week, which really allows me to be flexible, adaptable, and also spontaneous as well. And then in the background, I've just drawn some wonky staves, flowing staves, we'll call them flowing staves. The notes I've written are random. I have no idea what this music would sound like if you played it. It's actually been a really long time since I've written out music by hand. I actually had to look at some of my printed sheet music to see how to write a crotchet rest because I'd forgotten how to draw one by hand. But I really like the way this little background turned out. I had a lot of fun drawing it as well. And I just like the aesthetic of the staves flowing down the page. The next spread I'm setting up is entirely in Spanish, and the title at the top says La Oración de la Semana, which means sentence of the week. Any Spanish speakers, feel free to correct me on that. I'm pretty sure that is how you'd say it. I added this spread this year to try and help me improve my Spanish. I first started learning Spanish in my 3rd year of uni as an elective, and I was quite good at it. I got a first in that module, but when I left uni, I had no way of practicing. And then, I'm not sure how long ago, a few years ago at least, I started Duolingo to try and get back on the horse. I'm currently, at the time of recording, on my 695-day streak. By the time you see this, I should have broken 700 days. But yeah, one of the drawbacks with Duolingo is that it doesn't really encourage you to actively use the language. You're either translating, or you're transcribing, or you're parroting what you hear. So I started this to try and practice expressing my own thoughts in Spanish. And like the title suggests, I write 1 sentence a week. Usually I write more than 1 sentence in Spanish. And then I also have at the bottom La Memoria del Mes, which means the memory of the month, where I write down a memory from the month. I do tend to have to look up vocab quite a lot when I'm doing my sentence of the week, but I do feel like this is helping to an extent, and I am slowly having to look up words less and less. More recently, I've also started this week taking steps towards immersing myself more fully in the Spanish language. So, for example, while I was filming myself setting up my spreads, I was listening to the 2008 Barcelona cast recording of Into the Woods. Obviously, I wasn't concentrating on the language, I was concentrating on setting up these spreads and not making any mistakes. But firstly, kind of immersing myself in the language in that way, it apparently helps you get used to the cadence and the rhythm of the language. Secondly, listening to musical theatre songs, especially where I know the song in English, I find it easier to understand what's being said in Spanish and easier to pick out words that I recognise because I know the gist of what should be being said. And then also, particularly today, it just reminded me how much I love Sondheim and how much I love Sondheim shows, and the music in them is just really, really great. So now I've moved on to my habit and mood tracker. There's lots of ways people in the bullet journaling community choose to track these things. You can do individual trackers for each habit. You can do elaborate artistic ways of tracking your mood by drawing things and colouring them in each day. I just go with a bog standard table. I like my table layout. Not only is it arguably one of the more simple setups for habit and mood tracking, but I also like being able to see how my habits affect my mood. Obviously that's not exact because there are other things that can impact your mood, not just doing or not doing certain things, but I do like to see if there's any correlation in that. My habit and mood tracker has evolved over the year and a bit that I have been bullet journaling, but some constants that I've always tracked are my water intake, because I'm terrible at drinking enough water, my body and physical health, my mind and my mental health, and my mood, obviously. And then additionally, this month I'm deciding to track my creative activities, which I started tracking when lockdown first happened last month. My work, which I've added back in for this month, but rather than tracking specific work things, for example, how much singing practice I do, I've kept it more general, as in this time where basically the whole of the entertainment industry is shut down. The kind of things that I'll be doing are kind of more foundational things, keeping on top of things rather than more specific tasks. And relationships, which I started tracking last year because I'm terrible at keeping in touch with people. I always second guess myself when it comes to reaching out to my friends, and that's always exacerbated by my busy lifestyle. So I started tracking when I was seeing my friends, when I was talking to my friends, things like that. And then at the top I've got another music quote, which is, "Without music, life would be a mistake," which is a quote by Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche, I believe is his first name. So yeah. And then finally, I've got my weekly logs and my weekly spreads. These spreads are the simplest spreads I do. They're very simple and functional because I have to do them every week, so I don't want to make them too complicated. So my weekly spreads consist of my weekly task list and my positives log and gratitude log. My positives log is very simple. You just have to write down at least 3 positive things that have happened that day. Even if you've had a terrible day, you have to find at least 3 things. And I've been doing that for several years now. My gratitude log is a more recent addition, and I started logging that after reading Brené Brown's book Daring Greatly. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. I've watched all of her TED Talks, but Daring Greatly is the first of her books that I've read, and in her work in general she talks a lot about gratitude. For me, gratitude felt like a very distinct thing to positives, so I wanted to have a separate way of logging or practicing gratitude, but I also thought they were kind of connected, so I've made a separate box within the page that I do my positives log to note down things that I'm grateful for in the week. I forgot to write it in when I was filming this clip, but at the top it says, "This week I was grateful for," and then just as I feel gratitude for things, or as I think about things that I'm grateful for, I write them down. And then my weekly task list, which I'm just finishing off now, is again very simple. It's just 7 rectangular boxes, 1 for each day, and in those boxes I write down any deadlines or events or tasks that I want to carry over from my monthly list into my days for that specific week. With things like deadlines, I'll write them in straight away, or when I was working before everything got shut down, things like my shifts I would write down straight away. But with tasks, I plan those on the day or the night before. Again, because by that time I know it's unlikely that something is going to come up that I have to do right away. And so here is my final flip through of my setup for May. It's a very simple layout, as you can see, very, very monochromatic, but it will be a lovely, practical and functional setup for May. I know that bullet journaling isn't for everyone. Some people can just get by with regular year diaries. Some people prefer using online tools. In fact, most of the people that don't get why I bullet journal say they prefer using online calendars and things. And that's cool. I'm a massive believer in all aspects of life in doing what works for you. You know yourself best. Hopefully you can take the core ideas of some of my spreads and fit them to adapt with how you motivate and organise yourselves. Or maybe you just like watching people draw things on the internet. That's also cool. Either way, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. It would really help me to grow my channel. And if you didn't like this video, feel free to tell me why in the comments. The YouTube algorithm doesn't discriminate. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye friends!